for bringing a harmonious living or a harmonious atmosphere in a diversified society. As we told earlier, we can take different measures like ensuring social justice in all the walks of life, teaching how to respect and love others from the very beginning of one's own life, teaching history, then observing different cultural activities of different cultural groups, teaching the basic elements of each and every religion in our country. Then I told you as the last point, but this is something very important in the case of bringing harmonious living in a diversified society, and that is using culturally responsive pedagogy in our classroom. What is this culturally responsive pedagogy? So I may ask this question to Mehrin. Mehrin, have you got any idea on this culturally responsive pedagogy? Yes, Mehrin.
So, I really have no idea about that.
Then I may ask you another question, Mehrin. What is meant by pedagogy? Actually, this word has got two pronunciations, pedagogy and pedagogy. Both of them are right, I feel. But most of the people use pedagogy, so itself I also use pedagogy. Mehrin, what is pedagogy?
Pedagogy can be said as a practice of teaching, like teaching some theoretical concept or something like that.
Yeah. Pedagogue means teacher. Pedagogue means teacher. Pedagogy is science of teaching. The methodologies which we use for teaching. The concept of methods and strategies for teaching. So, in simple words, we can tell pedagogy is science of teaching. Then what is culturally responsive pedagogy? So I may ask another question before that, before telling about this pedagogy of, culturally responsive pedagogy. I think you might have heard about websites. There are traditional websites or classical websites, and now some modern approaches in the case of creation of designing of website. So I may ask you, what do you mean by responsive website? Responsive website. What is the difference between traditional websites and responsive websites? How can a website respond? How can a website respond? To whom? So that is what is there. Actually, traditionally websites were communicating something. Something means the communication was to the general audience. That means it was communicating some item to each and every reader. There was no response or there was no communication to particular audience or particular person. So if you just enter the website, you can read something and you can go away. But nowadays, people started creating responsive website. That means the audience or the readers or the browsers or the people.
Audience can respond in terms of comments and posts, etc.
Audience can respond, and websites will be responding to the questions of audience. Yes. That means customers will be getting answers for their doubts. There will be some options for clarifying our doubts. So that means websites are created on the basis of the interest of different audience. Okay. Well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The communication is better.
Yeah. Yes. That is. I mean, just actually, static websites are giving information without knowing the interest of the people. But nowadays, we see some responsive website. That means audience can clarify their doubts. Then websites can give information on the basis of the interest of different audience. So here, the customers get what they want on the basis of their individual difference. So this is responsive website. Then just take it as an example and think about our classroom. Pedagogy is science of teaching. That means the methods, the ways, the techniques and so used by the teacher. Then in the past, actually teachers were doing just like the traditional websites were doing, just as the traditional websites were doing. What was it? Yes. Yes. They would teach to the general class. Yes. Yes. They would make
like monologue.
Yeah.
One-way communication.
One-way communication, and they will, even if they were asking some questions, they would ask the questions in the written language format. They would not be thinking about the different dialects used by the students who are there in the classroom. They would not be thinking about the different art forms, different forms of literature, which were familiar to the students. So there was a general teaching inside the classroom, but nowadays we are thinking about culturally responsive pedagogy. That means we have seen that the classroom is a diversified society, which below the classroom consists of students who belong to different cultural backgrounds. Now, who can define culturally responsive pedagogy? Yes, that means to teach something by giving due regard to the cultural aspects of different students in your classroom. Yes? Yes, am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That means in your classroom there are students who belong to different cultural backgrounds. Sometimes some students may be using a particular dialect. Some other students may be using some other dialect. Some other group of students may be using some other dialect. Then if you are teaching only in the written format of language, sometimes some of the students may not be able to follow you because they are using some other dialect at their locality. So here the teacher should be able to speak, or the teacher should be able to transcribe, or the teacher should be able to explain the items in different dialects at times. That means the teacher cannot teach in a general manner, but the teacher should teach by giving due regard to the cultural elements of different students who belong to different cultural backgrounds. And this way, this method, this strategy for teaching inside the classroom is known as culturally responsive pedagogy. Got it? Yes. So,
Yes, sir.
culturally responsive pedagogy is the teaching strategy used by a teacher in a diversified classroom by giving due regard to the cultural elements of or the cultural features of different students in his or her classroom who belong to different cultural backgrounds. And to relate some art forms which we are teaching in a foreign language to some art forms which are familiar to the cultural backgrounds of students. So you cannot teach in a general manner in a diversified classroom. You should give due attention to the different cultural aspects of different students who are sitting in your classroom. Got it? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is culturally responsive pedagogy. Very, very simple. Teaching in a classroom by giving due attention to the cultural aspects of different students who belong to different cultural backgrounds. Now, I may ask you a question. Actually, if you have to make use of culturally responsive pedagogy in your classroom, you should know about the different cultural aspects of your students. Then, what are the measures? What are the measures to be taken by the teacher to make use of culturally responsive pedagogy in his classroom? Yes, you know that you have to make use of culturally responsive pedagogy, but if you are not familiar with different aspects of different cultural backgrounds of your students, how can you make use of culturally responsive pedagogy? That's a serious question. You cannot avoid this question. You cannot neglect this question. As a teacher, you should be able to use culturally responsive pedagogy. For using culturally responsive pedagogy, you should be familiar with different cultural aspects of each and every student of your classroom. How can you do that? So what are the measures which can be taken or which should be taken by the teacher for making use of culturally responsive pedagogy as the strategy for teaching in his classroom? What can we do? What a teacher should do for making use of culturally responsive pedagogy in the classroom? Yes?
Firstly, we want to study the background of students.
Yeah. So, how can we study the backgrounds of students, cultural backgrounds of students? How can we study?
By interaction.
Yes, through interaction. Then. Yes, through interaction. That means you should give a chance to introduce each and every student in your classroom. That is the first thing. You should make some casual talks. You should not only teach some content which are there in your textbook, but also you should find time for, or you should spend time for having some casual talks with your students. You can make them introduce themselves. You can make them tell their surroundings, tell about their circumstances. You can make them tell about their village, their locality. And when they start speaking, you can know about the difference in their dialect. You can interact with your students. By interacting with your students, sometimes you may be able to collect some items of the cultural aspects of different students. So Fatima has given this answer. You can interact with your students. That means you can have some casual talks. You can have, you can give them an opportunity for self-introduction. Yes. Then anything else?
You can read about.
Yeah.
You can read about the cultural aspects of the place you are visiting in, or you are teaching.
Yes, that's also good, because if you get some ideas of different areas from where the students are coming, then you can read some books on some cultural folks, some cultural art forms. Yes, then you can read some books on the dialect which is used at a particular area. Then you can collect the words which are used by the students at their home. Yes, Demit, you are right. So you can read some books on local folks, local language, the dialects.
Also, you can interact with the people surrounding.
That is also a very good method. You can visit the locality. You can visit the locality from where the students come, and you can interact with the people who belong to the localities from where the students come. You can visit the homes of the students. You can visit the homes of the students, you can meet the parents, you can meet the community to which the students belong to. Then you can meet some community leaders. So you can visit the homes of the students. That's also a very good point. Then
also find out the customs and religious practices. Take part in the religious festivals, etc. In that place.
Yes, of course, Vrunda, you're exactly correct. To participate in different festivals and celebrations held at the locality. So you can just try to participate. You can just try to attend the celebrations. Maybe you may be from a different place, and if you're working at a particular place, sometimes the students may be from different cultural backgrounds, and at places maybe some art forms such as Theyyam is there. Then if there is Theyyam, then you can attend the function. And if there is something else, if there is Autumn Tulalo, if there is Kathakali, then you can just attend the function. And by attending different celebrations held at the locality from where the students come, then you can get a thorough idea on the cultural backgrounds of your students. Yes, Brunda, you're right. Then yes.
I think it would be better to know about the social issues in that specific locality.
Oh, this is also a very good point. You should know about the social issues, maybe some social issues there, some contemporary issues may be there. Then if you know about the social issues, and if you are interfering or if you are trying to solve such issues, again you can get some access to the society, and this will be helping you to mingle with the people of a particular locality without any sort of hesitation. Yes, you're right. Yes, right. Then the first and foremost thing is that the teacher should realize that he also is a part of social diversity. This is something important, because sometimes if we come to a particular area and when we have to face something different from our own culture, sometimes we may be getting a sort of feeling in our mind, a sort of I think a wrong concept, a sort of mistaken notion on the cultural aspects of our students. But when we introspect ourselves, when we think about ourselves, we can realize that we also are a part of social diversity. And if you think that you are a part of social diversity, then you can think that there will be different types of culture, different types of lifestyles. So I have to accept that social diversity. And this mentality is important. The teacher should keep an adaptable mentality, that the teacher should be able to accept that the reality that there is social diversity in our country. So if I am to work in a school, I should be ready for accepting different cultural aspects of different students who belong to different cultural entities. Yes, so this is something important. Yes. Then, my dear students, similarly, you should make your students to accept the reality that there is social diversity. You should make them believe that, or you should make them accept the reality that there is social diversity. So they should be able to think, yes, I have got my own culture, so some other students have got some other culture. This is a part of our society, so I have to respect this social diversity. Such a feeling should be created in the minds of your students. And as we told, for creating a harmonious situation, a harmonious atmosphere in a diversified society, we should make our students keep respect towards the cultural aspects of other students. So this mutual respect and mutual understanding should be created by the teachers inside the classroom. And similarly, you can make students from different cultural backgrounds perform the art forms which belong to their own cultural entity. So my dear students, what can we do more, or what can the teacher do more for having a culturally responsive pedagogy in the classroom? You should have some indirect observation, because you have to observe your students. You have to observe your students means without their knowing. They should not know that you are observing. And when you observe your students out of the classroom, then you can realize their real behavior, their real language, their real talent and such things. Okay, you are right person. So we can tell that observing the behavior patterns of students, observing them indirectly, without informing them. Yes, you are right person. Okay, this also can be considered as a point. Yes, well then. So I have told you that no point is faulty point, because when you give a point, you should be able to prove it. That's only the important. Teachers should avoid prejudice. Teachers should avoid prejudice about the cultural aspects of different students who come from different cultural backgrounds, and this is something important. Teachers should never keep any sort of prejudice, and this is also important in the case of culturally responsive pedagogy. Teachers should avoid any sort of prejudice about any cultural aspect of any student in the classroom. Time is 11:30. Now you know what culturally responsive pedagogy is, and you know how can a teacher effectively utilize culturally responsive pedagogy in his classroom. Thank you very much. You can just leave the classroom. Yes, Shahima.
Teacher should be a role model. We can at that point also.
Yeah.
Teacher should be a role model.
Okay, this point also can be included there, Shehima, because you should respect the cultural aspects of others. So this point also can be considered as a significant point in this case. Teachers should be a role model for the students to make them respect the cultural aspects of others. I'm sorry I have taken one extra minute. Thank you very much, and you can leave the classroom and you can have an interval of 10 minutes. Then after that you can rejoin the class given by another teacher. Thank you very much.